Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Blaster Master 02. In the last part we made our way here to planet Stranga and fought off Kanna, and now it's time for us to go find the fruit she wants us to find. And in order to get them pretty universally, you now need to use the new Repulsion Upper sub-weapon for the Sophia. We got a lot. The Repulsion Upper, as its name and appearance implies, is a spring that will launch you about the height of that tree upwards. But you can also use it to launch other entities, such as enemies or these seeds in this area. When you hit an enemy with it, it does do some contact damage, but it's pretty negligible, and it will launch. If they get launched with it, they take about, apparently, the equivalent of a single G-Crusher shot in damage. We need to use it more as a puzzle solution than an active attack, though. We need to use it to launch the Sophia through the top of certain water bodies, because you can't just jump out of them in most cases. And we need to use it to launch these seeds upwards to get to certain pots in order to make the fruit we need for Kanna. With that said, if you came to Area E first, the Repulsion Upper is the counter to the ground level charge attack that Garuda had in the boss fight back in Area D. So if you're trying to make a later fight as hard as possible and activate all the enhanced attacks down the line, this is what you need to use on that. Again, I honestly do like that you can go to Area D or E first, and going to one will make the other universally easier in some form, even if it's just making that one attack easier in the Garuda fight, or giving you more health for Strangas. At times, kind of difficult combat situations, even though combat's not really a focus here. Repulsion Upper fires a spring of repulsive force. You can use it to jump, and though it won't let you reach as high as the hover, it can be more SP efficient. It's also useful for recovering SP in flat areas. If an enemy steps on it, they'll be shot upwards. Heavier flying enemies won't be affected, though. When an enemy triggers it, they'll be defenseless. Fire diagonally to take advantage of the situation. Yeah, it does have some combat utility, because enemies will be stunned in midair for a second, but I'd rather just mash fire into them. And she is right in that using the Repulsion Upper will use less SP than just spamming the hover technique, but I just prefer to use the hover only because I can use walls in a lot of cases with the recoil jump to save on SP in that regard anyway. But in the case you're very low on SP, I do recommend using a Repulsion Upper to maybe get a high enough jump to recover most of your SP. So a lot of this area moving forward is going to be us using the Drill Smasher in tandem with the Repulsion Upper to find the other two fruit. With that said, you may have noticed there was a weird, like, sunflower gate. There's also one right there on the right side of the screen. Don't enter those at the moment. What those are fast travel points to get back to the entrance of the room we were just in, and you're going to need to use those in order to actively get back. The latter two fruits are a little more involved than that first one, which is sort of a tutorial for the Repulsion Upper to begin with, in that we now have to contend with getting the seeds across hazardous areas. Namely, those pink floors. They will hurt both the Sophia, but they'll also completely destroy the seed. So we need to use these foot plants to ferry the seeds across the hazards. With that said, there's going to be points where you're going to need to use the Repulsion Upper to either knock the seed off of these or even make the plants themselves jump. So it might be worth actively taking some damage on the purple ground and seeing what's ahead of you to try and react to it accordingly. A little bit of an awkward thing with the Repulsion Upper, though, is that it does carry momentum when you're moving. And there's cases you need to use that in order to, like, say, get the Repulsion Upper far enough away from you to get the seed in the right place. But the momentum is really 0 to 100 with it. When you're moving and throw it, it's going to go a certain set distance, and if you're not moving and throw it, it's going to go a set distance. And there is some awkwardness in the control for the seed and the Repulsion Upper due to that. You can shoot the seeds, thankfully, to just knock them around a little bit to get them across a horizontal area more quickly. But I don't think you can shoot the Repulsion Uppers to move those, which I kind of wish you could. But for the most part, you really only super use the Repulsion Upper a lot here in Area E to begin with, so it's not a very big problem. Alright, 2 seeds down, two fruit down, 1 to go. We now need to go to the very bottom section of Stranga. So, at the end of last time, I brought up that I feel Stranga is a low point in the game, and how I kind of feel like it's meant to be. For why that is, 02 is a very fast-paced, action-filled game compared to 01 even, which had its slower platforming moments because it was trying to stay true to the original NES game. And I feel like they just tried to condense all the puzzle ideas and platforming, slower stuff here into this planet. And I think it works, and it does feel like a needed part of the game. Because while it is a low point, it's also a very good breather after some more hectic sections of the game, and before easily the most hectic planet in the game for main story stuff. So I feel like it is needed for the game's pacing in order to give you that one moment to breathe before things really pick back up. I think some games don't need things like that, but with how this game is designed, I think it's needed. I think actually 03 may have needed a section a little more like this in pacing, because its equivalent section, I think, is a little more annoying with how it does things. But I'll talk about that again when I eventually get to 03. That's one of my favorite enemies in the entire game. The traitor checkpoint. It's just this worm that coils up at a 45-degree angle and will then fire a gigantic laser. So make sure you're, like, directly beneath that thing when it fires, otherwise you will get hit. Yeah, I just think that's kind of funny. I like when games do stuff like that, even if it's usually a dick move at the same time. One of the ones I can immediately think of is Metroid Fusion. There's those two item pickups in the game. That's an energy tank and a missile tank somewhere on the BSL station that are actually like these weird bat enemies. I just think that's incredibly funny. Also, I might as well talk about this because some people may have picked up on it and thought it was a little weird. You may have noticed last time after the air fight, the voice modulation to be like the communicator stopped happening on the dialogue. I actively have a reason for that. And it's because I do that when I think the metal attackers are probably feel like they're safe and they don't need to be in combat mode, so to speak. Like, instead of them talking over the communicators through the tanks, they'll have, like, the door open and be talking with each other, even though they're not actively, sprite-wise, outside of the tank. Like, to explain that, like, the Kanna fight, they're safe in the room, there's no more threats, so their doors are open and they're talking with each other. Whereas, like, say, after the Zavira fight, we kept that going because they were still in active enemy territory, so they could have been attacked at any point. It probably seems weird, it feels like it's appropriate to me, so that's why I'm doing it. I know it might seem inconsistent, but it's really dependent on whether or not I think the area seems safe at that point. Although I guess in this case, actually, I probably should have kept it going because Planet Stranga has the whole atmosphere thing that could be harming Eve, but oh well. We brought the fruit you wanted. Now, about that access key. Cool your jets. Just like, wait a second. Deep breath. Here we go. Pop. Okay, come and get it. Kanna took the flower she plucked from her head along with the 3 fruits and stuffed them in Yakopu's mouth. What the? Yakopu's like super special. He can mix all the goodies that he eats and he can like make medicine from it. All done. Here you go, Eve. This medicine's totally for you. Drink it up, like all in one gulp. Medicine? What are you? My body feels so light. Awesome, but it's just for a while, so like, don't get used to it. To get totally healed, I bet you have to like, get to your planet. Only temporary, huh? Still, thank you, Kanna. It's all good. I wanted to get some use out of that flower I totally worked hard to grow. I also kind of wanted to, like, tease you a bit, too. My goodness, Miss Kanna. You truly are a handful. Thank you. With that, can you tell us about that access key? Oh, that, yeah, like, there's totes no key here. You totally fell for it. Cease this tomfoolery, Kanna. Please, take this data. Planetoid map E3. A planetoid map? Yeah, it's like super fast, like Planetoid! It appears that a mutant on that planetoid holds the access key. As Kanna mentioned, this planetoid develops quite quickly, so take care. I wish we could assist you two more directly, but alas, we must take some time to repair air before we can act again. Understood. We can handle that mutant on our own. May you find fortune in battle. Bye-bye, flower! Yeah, see, like, they directly handed that, cure to Eve, so, like, the door's gotta be open, right? With that, though, I'm just gonna jump cut back to the exit, because we're actively done on Stranga for a good bit now. And now I get to talk about the Planetoids here in Area E, which are a little different. Unlike the Planetoids in any other sector in the game, these ones move. The first two just sort of revolve in certain areas, but where the boss fight is, which I believe is E3, is bouncing around like a DVD logo across the screen, and you just kind of have to stick around in certain areas and hope it lands on top of you, mashing the A button. You can try to follow it, but it's not exactly the most effective strategy to get around here, honestly. Now, while I generally do like the Planetoid setup for this game with how it handles little side areas and challenges, if there's one thing that I don't like about some of them, it's how they place the overall sector map on some of the Planetoids, like the one that gives the map for the main planet, but also the Planetoids. I feel like that's something you should put on the main planet and have the player find along the way in there, or at least can find along the way in there, just to help navigate anything from therein. Placing it on a planetoid that you'd either have to leave the planet midway through to go to, or will find basically potentially at the end of exploring the entire sector feels a little annoying. And what's especially weird is that I genuinely feel like it wouldn't be nearly as off-putting if this game had ultimately been designed more like 0-1 and Blaster Master 1 and it had more of an interconnected area, because then maybe there's areas you could have missed secret passageways in because you didn't remember to backtrack to them. But because the levels in this game are so condensed down into very structured areas, missing a map isn't as needed, yeah, but it makes it feel like you should just have that map to begin with. Like maybe this game should have just done what Metroid Zero Mission did, and maybe after you meet a metal attacker on a planet, you just get that entire planet's map just as a standard thing. I don't know, there's just something about it, it's hard to parse into words, but it just feels a little off. And there's the map. Also, one thing I'm very glad the game does. Whenever you pick up a planetoid map for a planetoid in a different sector, they do jump cut to that sector to show that planetoid appearing. I feel like some games would have just had them appear without showing you directly, and it just would have been easy to forget that. Although you can tell what planetoids you haven't been to yet, I think, by looking at the sprites, because when you haven't been there yet, or at least if you haven't gotten everything there yet, maybe, they do pulsate, like, with a sonar ping, so keep that in mind. Alright, from memory, I think E2 is a pretty quick planetoid. I think we're just here for a one planetoid map. What is pretty nice about the planetoids, though all the same, I like that a lot of them use your different abilities in ways that the main levels might not necessarily, or at least will help reinforce what the abilities do. And in some regards, you could look at them as challenge levels, I guess. Some of them don't exactly put all of your abilities to the test, or even specific ones sometimes don't get enough use, but I like that that's like that all the same. Planetoid map get, now we can go fight the boss fight. I guess that's something else I do appreciate about the planetoids here, like they do a good job at varying the length so it doesn't feel like they all just start taking forever by the end of the game. Some will always be a little short, some will go on a little longer and have more to do. Varying that length up I think is actually kind of important for this game's structure, because if they just started short and then just got forever longer, it would just feel tedious to start going through them, because it's like, alright, I finished the main planet, I'm only like 40% done with the sector kind of deal. With that though, now for the real challenge, accessing Planet E3. I tend to stick towards the top left of the sector because I feel like it has a good chance of bouncing up that way in particular throughout its DVD logo-esque bounces, but it really is just a matter of luck and just trying to find where it is. And I won't lie, this is probably one of my favorite bosses in the game, especially because there's a couple ways you could just absolutely humiliate this thing. Oh, this room might look a little familiar. Ah, that's why. Skeleton boss? No, this one's different. Jason, I'm picking up a signal. It's the access key. Then, this must be the mutant Kanna and Kenwood told us about. Skeleton boss from 0-1 is back, but we actually have to fight it this time as Sarah Boss. Each of the 3 heads has a different attack, and they take about 60-ish shots to kill. The Hexamissiles and the Drill Smasher are your best friends here, because for one thing, you can use the rocks of the Drill Smasher to just completely tear through this thing's health. But also, when you fire the Hexamissiles, they'll try to lock on to the skulls in the background, but they will ultimately come to the one that's in the foreground. Whenever this thing attacks, its main head will do a certain attack that the other heads will then mimic. For instance, the gray head does a fireball that leaves some fire residue. The yellow head does a lightning trail that the lightning bolt itself won't hurt you, but the orb at the beginning and end will. And I forget what the green head does at this point, but as well, whenever you take out more heads, some rocks will roll in from off-screen and try to hurt you. They're relatively small and easy to dodge, though. Yeah, that fight looks threatening, but it's pretty easy. Now that we have the access key, we can move on to the next sector. Between the access key and that medicine, Kanna really helped us out. She's quite strange, but thanks to her, I feel a lot better. Next time we meet, maybe I'll say it for her. Flower! That boy just found that adorably goofy. And with that, we're also largely done with Sector E. Like I said, we are gonna have to come back to basically every sector at least once down the line of the game for side quests of sorts. But even compared to other sectors, you need to come back to Sector E for very little. With that said, now we'll have access to the next sector, Sector F. And despite the alphanumeric order, we can't access Sector F through Sector E. We need to access it through Sector C in the northeast. But first we have some more Planetoids to take care of, so let's go grab ourselves some more sub-weapons, pickups, and all that. Now, even if you're not going for 100%, I do recommend you come here to Planetoid C4 after going to E2. Because the sub-weapon you pick up at the end of this area is very important for certain boss weaknesses, in a vein similarly to the torch bomb. In a way I'll talk about it more in a few moments. We do have a bit of a split path with this one though. The path east, which leads down south towards an SP up, which you should get anyway, and the north towards the actual sub-weapon. Plus, this is where the checkpoint is, even though you don't really need a checkpoint here, because I think if you pick up an item like an SP up and die, the SP up is still saved, I think? Now, from memory, the upcoming enemy rush has no new enemies, so we are going to speed it up. So let's start talking about the sub-weapon we're going to pick up for beating it. For beating this particular planet, you get this sub-weapon, Flash Striker, which, similarly to the Torch Bomb, is the spin-off of another weapon. This is a spin-off of the Flash Sphere. This is a landmine that explodes and deals lightning damage. Lightning damage is not a damage over time like fire damage was. It's more of an additional stun effect on any given enemy. When you use the G-Blaster shot, when you have Flash Striker orbs out, they'll gain that property. The Stinger, level 2 blaster, gets an especially interesting effect when used with Flash Striker. Hitting enemies with the Stinger will embed the projectile into them, of course. And if you use the Flash Striker on that, you can electrify the enemies. And you can do it to multiple enemies using lightning chains. That can deal upwards of 6 times the G-Blaster's base damage per second on enemies impaled by upwards of 3 Stingers at a time. So it's not a bad way to just melt through a lot of mini-boss or boss HP, assuming they're not invulnerable or reduced lightning damage to begin with. Otherwise, the charge shot for the EX charge also becomes a lightning elemental thing, which becomes an all-piercing projectile that's just faster than most of the other charge shots. If enemies survive it, they get shocked for longer, of course, until the residual charge completely disappears. Similarly to the Torch Bomb, you can only have one Flash Striker active at a time, but I think unlike Torch Bomb, you can use the Flash Striker in tandem with other sub-weapons. So you could, like, map the Flash Striker to, like, ZL and have, like, the landmines going at the same time. This planet is a bit of a maze, because we are looking for keys to open up doors to get other sub-weapons in a pretty familiar way. But what's kind of annoying here is that we're introduced to these little spike ball enemies that we're going to see a bit moving forward. They're annoying because they're homing enemies. Their only attack is contact damage, barring when you shoot them enough, they grow and then explode, shooting those spikes out in every direction. If you're in close quarters with that, that is very hard to avoid, and I would recommend using longer range weapons, whatever you have available to you, to deal with them because of that. With that said, the whip is also very effective against them because they're treated as a projectile in and of themselves, so you can just knock that enemy far away from you into like some spikes or other enemies to do damage, I believe. From memory, by the way, this is the planet I was confusing Montage with when it comes to the keys, where for some reason in my brain I thought you couldn't access one of the areas without one of the keys, but in order to get 100% in the game anyway, you need to get every key in here because of some of the items locked behind doors. Be a little less reckless than I am right there, by the way. While blast counter spinning does prevent enemies from damaging you in most cases, hazards like spikes still can, and I very often take very dumb hits doing that. Before I go further in this room after taking care of this enemy, though, now that I have enough keys, we're going to backtrack and grab the obvious sub-weapon that was back down below us, And it's easily one of the most good, if you know how it works, sub-weapons in the game. Because it's very defensive, but it has a lot of offensive potential because of how it works. This over here is the Reactive Comet. The best way I can describe the Reactive Comet is as an aggressive version of a Mega Man shield, where you can use up to 4 of its ammo at once to have up to 4 bits circling you, and these can do contact damage on enemies to take a hit for you, and they do about, I think, twice the base level 1 blaster's damage when they do so. But they actively have secondary effects whenever you use any of the various blast counters in the game. For instance, with the Reflex Striker, successfully countering an enemy will launch all the bits at the first countered enemy. Using it with the counter we got from Ganbei, dashing will consume a bit to protect Jason from damage during that dash, so it's now an invincible dash that you could use to, say, go over spike hazards and all that. And I think if you touch an enemy while you're doing that, they'll take contact damage and then might actively be blast counterable again. And with the Vertex Reflector, activating that will send all the bits you have spawned out in a spiral pattern regardless whether or not any bullets are reflected. It has a lot of toolkit use, but it's just situational enough despite its nature that I don't tend to use it a lot, on top of the fact that I'd rather use ammo pickups on a lot of my other sub-weapons. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in Part 8, we're going to head on over to Sector F. See you guys then.